In the beginning of Parshat Terumah, Hashem gives a really odd command to the Jewish people. Hashem says, "V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," that you have to make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, and then v'shachanti b'tocham, I will dwell amongst you. And it seems strange. It almost seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't going to dwell amongst the Jewish people unless they first make for him a sanctuary. And why is that? Why is God dwelling amongst the Jewish people conditional, dependent on them making a sanctuary for him? Is it because Chas v'Shalom, Hashem is selfish and he's saying, well, I'm not going to dwell amongst you unless you first do something for me, and only when you first do something for me, only then am I going to do something for you? That doesn't seem right. Could it be Chas v'Shalom that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unable to dwell amongst the Jewish people unless we make for him a vessel, some sort of place in which he's able to dwell? Chas v'Shalom, we can't limit God like that. So why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't choose to dwell amongst Bnei Yisrael v'shachanti b'tocham unless we first v'asu li mikdash, make for him a sanctuary? So in order to answer this question, we have to go back in time and understand the relationship that the Jewish people have with Hashem. And to do that, we have to go back to when this relationship started, back in the time of Avraham. And I want to give a huge shout out to Rabbi Dr. Meir Soloveitchik for sharing a lot of these ideas with me in our Kuzari class that I take with him, which is really fantastic. But essentially the idea is as follows. Why did Hashem pick Avram, out of all people, to have a relationship with? So we grow up with the stories from the Midrashim that Abraham was the first one to recognize Hashem, and Abraham discovered monotheism, and Abraham decided to smash all the idols and instead spread monotheism to the entire world, which are all fantastic reasons for Hashem to choose Abraham. But we have to recognize that these are Midrashim. There's a reason whether these stories are true or not. They weren't placed in the text of the Torah Shebechtav. Nowhere in the text of Tanakh do we have the stories of Abraham discovering monotheism. And therefore, even if it may be a tangential reason for why Hashem picked Abraham, it doesn't seem to be the main reason. What is the main reason why Hashem picked Abraham? Why Hashem chose him? What do we see in the text of Tanakh as the explanation for why Hashem picked Abraham? Well, if we look at the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha, where Hashem first speaks to Abraham and tells him to go to the land of Israel, there doesn't seem to be anything prefacing it. It seems to be that God picks Abraham randomly. There's nothing that comes before it where Hashem says why he's picking Abraham. Except there is. There are two tiny pieces of information which at first seem insignificant, but really teach us a lot about why Abraham is unique and special. Those pieces of information aren't found at the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha, but are found right before it, at the end of Parshat Shemot. Because when we're first introduced to Abraham, we are told two things about him. Thing number one is that Abraham married a woman named Sarai. And thing number two is that Sarai was barren. She wasn't able to have any kids. Why are these two pieces of information significant? Well, it's significant that Abraham chose to marry Sarai because at this point in time, no one else in society was actively choosing to get married. Men at that time used women for their own pleasure, either to produce kids to have legacy and then they wouldn't continue a relationship with the woman, or in order to be fulfilled sexually. But a man wasn't choosing to give of himself to a woman in order to have a real lasting relationship, a real bond. There was only one other person in the Torah before Abraham who the Torah describes as taking a wife. So it's significant that Abraham took a wife, Sarai, to show that he didn't just want to use a woman for himself, but he wanted to give to someone else, give horizontally like that. And why is it significant that Sarai was barren and didn't have a kid? The Torah doesn't mention every single time a person doesn't have a child, unless it's significant. And it seems to be significant to Abraham and Sarai that they didn't have a kid. Seemingly, they wanted a kid, but they weren't able to produce one. And we see throughout the Parshat Lech Lecha that Avraham and Sarai, it bothers them that they aren't able to have a kid. And this also shows something about Avraham, that he didn't just think about himself, but he also wanted to have a relationship with someone, to give to someone vertically. It's important that he married Sarai because he's giving horizontally, and important that he wants a kid because he wants to give vertically. The point is, why is Avraham special? Why did Hashem pick Avraham? Seemingly because Avraham didn't just think about himself, but because he thought about others. He wanted to give of his life to those who were outside of just himself. And this isn't just a cute inference from the Psukim, but we see this explicitly a couple prakim later. Before Hashem destroys the city of Sodom, Hashem says, I'm going to tell Abraham what I'm going to do. I'm going to consult with Abraham. And then, right there and then, Hashem describes why it is that he picked Abraham to to have a relationship with, to be the father of this special nation. And the Torah says, V'Avram hayo yeh l'goy gadol v'atzum, that Avram is going to become this big nation. Why? Hashem says, Ki gedativ, the reason why I have chose to make myself known to him, I have chose to make myself close to him, the reason why I chose to have a relationship with him, is L'man asher yitzaveh banav yabeito acharav, v'shamaru derech Hashem atzot tzedakah u'mishpat. It's because Abraham is the kind of person who is going to command his children and command his household to follow the ways of Hashem, to do tzedakah u'mishpat, to do justice and righteousness. Abraham is someone who doesn't just think about himself, but he cares about the next generation. Cares about the world. He's going to try to give to others, instill values in other people, and try to make the world a better place. That is who Avram is. He isn't just self-centered and thinking about himself. He thinks about others and tries to think about giving towards others. That quality of giving towards others, of understanding that there's more than just you in the world, that is what made Avram so special. And that's why Hashem picked Abraham to have a relationship with. Why is this all relevant to our question about the Mishkan? Because you have to understand something about Am Yisrael at this point in time. The Jewish people, ever since they have been freed from Egypt, freed from slavery, they haven't been doing anything but getting. Rabbi Sachs makes this point. That the Exodus, Hashem gave Bnei Yisrael freedom. Hashem freed them miraculously. Then they get to the Yam Suf. Hashem splits the Yam Suf and gives them a way to cross the sea. And then when the Jews don't have food in the water, Hashem gives them man from the sky and slav flies in. And when the Jews don't have water, Hashem turns the bitter water, makes it sweet. Hashem makes water emerge from a rock. From the entire time since Bnei Yisrael left Egypt, they have just been constantly getting more and more. Hashem has been providing for them, and they've just been receiving. They have become getters. Now, being a getter makes an impact on you, psychologically. A person who is a getter starts thinking that the entire world revolves around him, becomes egocentric. It's why Bnei Yisrael complains so much, even about the little things. Because when you've been constantly getting, you start thinking that everything revolves around you and everyone deserves to give to you, and the moment you haven't received something, then the world is doing something wrong, and you start crying out like a baby. Babies are getters. Babies are beings or people who never give anything to others and instead just receive, and it makes them spoiled. And this has been the story of Bnei Yisrael from the time of Exodus until now, until the beginning of Parshat Terumah. But this isn't the nation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to have a relationship with. Hashem didn't pick Abraham because he was a selfish getter. Hashem picked Abraham because he was a giver. Because he thought about others besides for himself. He thought about the world. He thought about making a difference, about making an impact. He thought big. This nation that's a descendant of Abraham, these people who are just getters and they complain about the small little things because they think the world revolves around them, this isn't the nation with whom Hashem wants to have a relationship. So Hashem tells them to do something in order to change that, to make them realize what their priorities are. Rabbi Sachs explains that what's the point of Parshat Terumah? Not just the end goal, the totzah, the result of the building of a Mishkan. Rabbi Sachs says the point of Parshat Terumah is the journey, is the process of making the Mishkan. Because where did the material come from to make the Mishkan? Did Hashem make it fall from the sky? Magically produce these blocks of gold and silver that fell from the heavens? No. The beginning of the Parsha says, "V'chuli truma," the people have to give a truma. Me'it kol ish asher yidbar libo tichu et trumati. That from every person who chooses to, on their own, voluntarily and graciously give of their own stuff, a donation to Hashem, those are the materials that are going to be used for the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the first time Bnei Yisrael had the opportunity not just to get, but rather to give. It was their opportunity to change themselves from getters into givers. And that, the nation that decides to give of themselves, to sacrifice to a being that's other than them, that's external to them. They recognize that there's more to life than just themselves, and they want to be able to contribute to others. That nation that isn't just a getting nation, but a giving nation, that's the nation that Hashem wants to have a relationship with. Once Bnei Yisrael v'asu li mikdash were able to make something not for themselves, but for something else, someone else, for Hashem, only then v'shachanti b'tocham will Hashem be willing to dwell amongst them and have a relationship with them. And that is what it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. And I think this is an important idea to recognize for our avodas Hashem. The Ramban points this out in his introduction to Sefer Shemot, that the entirety of Sefer Shemot is called Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption. Except it's strange, because only the first half of Shemot, up until the splitting of the sea, maybe until the receiving of the Torah, only that part seems to be about redemption. The last half of Sefer Shemot, which is all about the building of the Mishkan, what does any of that have to do with Geula, with redemption? But the Ramban explains that just being freed from Egypt, even though we're no longer in slavery, that's not being truly freed. In order to be truly free, in order to be truly redeemed, we have to get to the level of our ancestors. And in order to do that, we have to build the Mishkan, and we have to have the Shekhinah dwell among us. This doesn't just mean that we have to be spiritually on the level of our ancestors, but that means we have to have the qualities that enable us to have that spiritual level that our ancestors have. The reason why our ancestors had such a high spiritual level, the reason why our ancestors had such a relationship with Hashem was because they weren't guiders, but rather because they were givers. And in order for us to truly be redeemed, for us to truly be free, we can't just physically be free, but we have to spiritually be free. Not trapped in our own heads, not trapped in this animalistic mindset that the world revolves around us, that everything is about us getting. That's not being free. Truly being free is fighting against that animalistic instinct, and to recognize that it's not just about getting, but really about giving. Once we do that, and then Hashem will be able to dwell amongst us and have a relationship with us. And it's important to think about when it comes to Avodas Hashem, because a lot of people, their entire lives, especially their religious lives, is just about them and how much they could grow religiously. And my Avodas Hashem is about how much I get to learn, and when I get to daven with a minyan, and how many brownie points I get. And even when you're doing chesed for others, you're doing chesed for others because it's about yourself. And you're using other people in order to check off boxes on your checklist to get reward up in heaven. And it's important for us to take a break and take a second to stop and think, who am I as an Oved Hashem? Am I doing this all for myself? Or am I doing it for others to make an impact on the world? Hashem chose Abraham, not because Abraham was selfish, but because he wanted to continue a legacy of people who followed in the way of Hashem, of people who cared about stakhat mishpat, righteousness, justice, who wanted to make the world a better place. Abraham thought big and wanted to make the world a better place. And that is the special quality that Hashem saw in him, that Hashem chose to develop a relationship with him. Hashem refused to dwell amongst Bnei Yisrael unless they had the same quality when building the Mishkan. That they recognized that the world wasn't just about them and didn't revolve around them, but there's a whole world out there, outside of themselves, that they had to contribute to, that they had to give to. So if we truly want to have a relationship with Hashem, if we really truly want to call ourselves Ovdei Hashem, we can't pretend to be religious by just thinking about our own personal religious growth. We have to think about the entire world, how we're able to give to it, both spiritually, religiously, and also in general, stakhat u'mishpat, with righteousness and justice. And only once we do that, can we truly be free? Can we truly say that we have a relationship with Hashem? And can we truly witness the fulfillment of the pasuk, v'shachanti b'tocham, that the Shekhinah, God's presence, is going to dwell amongst us? Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Bye-bye.